are headquartered in the UK, so don't have to go nearly as far out. There's also the possibility from a technical point of view that Libya looks really good. The problem is Libya is in Libya, and so you would have to first address the country's other shortcomings before you would be able to go into the kind of manpower heavy production in shale. Remember, shale, each well taps a single line or a single series of lines, and so from a man hours point of view, it's much more intensive than conventional. So physical security is a much bigger factor, and in Libya you can do the math. South Africa also looks interesting.
What implications do you see these energy disruptions having on the Canadian oil industry over the next 12 months?
Canadian oil has two problems. The one that they like to shout about is the less important of the two, and that's that Ottawa is green. In an environment of $150, $200 oil, it's easy to see people in Canada thinking that, maybe they can be part of the solution here. The second problem is infrastructure. All Canada's oil, or at least all of Alberta's oil, goes south. When it comes to the United States, it's going to be selling into that $70 market. So unless and until the Canadian federal government builds a massive pipeline from Alberta, either across the mountains or east to the St. Lawrence, there's not going to be any real build out. Because if there's no way to get it to the global market to take advantage of the arbitrage, it doesn't matter. So, I mean, Canadians will tell you that, building a line to and through Quebec to get to the St. Lawrence, you're talking a 4-year construction process. So even if the political issue in Canada didn't get in the way at all, this is several years away before Canada can be part of the solution.
Thank you. We also have a couple questions about nuclear power in general.
Sure.
And the nuclear power restarting in places like Germany specifically.
The German government 2 days ago came out flat and said it wasn't even under consideration, but the real shortages haven't hit them yet. So I totally expect at some point in the next month or two for the Germans to revisit that decision. It's weird. So much has changed in German politics in the last 6 days. I mean, we've had more dynamism in German policy in the last 6 days than the last 30 years. So a lot of these, no, we will never consider doing that, decisions that they're making in the past are being undone, and then things that they were always doing are being canceled in very short with a lot of rapidity. I can see Japan getting back into nukes. I can see France slowing their nuclear decommissioning and maybe even building it out again. Germany, as you said, they just have to turn them back on. They have the fuel. So it's a political decision that has to be made specifically by the foreign minister, who's the chief of the Greens. I think it will happen to a degree, but I think the more popular replacement fuel for Russian energy is going to be coal. That's definitely what the Poles are doing. They've already started expanding so they can cut the Russian gas out of their system. In fact, the only reason the Poles use Russian gas at all is because the rest of the European Union kept suing them for using coal. Well, they're going to go back now. The Germans have a lot of lignite, which is ultra soft brown coal. It is their single largest source of fuel, and they're probably going to increase their use of it by at least a third this year, because there just aren't any other options. I'm actually a little bit more concerned about Austria and Italy than I am about Germany, because Germany at least has the coal. Austria and Italy got nothing. So Italy is an energy hub, but they have no energy themselves. And once the natural gas gets cut off when it comes to electricity generation, I mean, sure, they've got better solar potential than most of Northern Europe, but that takes years to come online. So I can actually see the Italians burning oil to keep the lights on, burning $200 a barrel oil, because the alternative is to not have power. Everyone's going to have to make some really ugly decisions, and environmentalism writ large is going to take a very serious back seat. And we're going to see this repeated, not just in Europe, but throughout the world, everywhere outside of Anglo-America. People forget that oil and natural gas are the low carbon fossil fuels, and they are the ones that are internationally traded. Coal's local. we are perfectly capable of having an energy crisis and a global depression that is energy spiked, and yet still increase our carbon output.
All right, thank you. There's also a couple questions regarding why Russia can't pivot more of its energy exports toward China and Asia more directly.
Sure, it's an infrastructure issue. So there are three routes from Russia into East Asia. The first is the ESPO, the Pacific pipeline that ends right around Vladivostok. Its nameplate is about 1.6 million barrels per day. At present, there have been no interruptions to loadings. That will probably hold. There's no war over there, so you don't have to worry about the insurance issue. It's simply a reputational issue for taking Russian crude, and obviously the Chinese have no problem with that. So that's bucket one. Bucket two, there is a short spur line that takes about 500,000 barrels a day that goes directly from Russia to the Chinese city of Daqing, which is the old Chinese refining center. I see no reason why that'll be disrupted at all. I mean, if all of Russia's stuff in the end goes offline, that's the last one to fall. And as the Russians are having problems with production, they will preference that one for geopolitical as well as security reasons. And then the third route is more dispersed. It uses the rail lines and rail cars, and it does about 300,000 barrels a day. And that's about the max that the system can handle. The Russians for a while tried to upgrade their rail network, and they just discovered that the task was beyond them in terms of cost and equipment. So 1.5 roughly from ESPO, 500,000 from Daqing, and then about 300,000 from rail. And that's it. There's no other infrastructure. And as a rule, with the exception of rail, those two pipelines are filled by fields that do not link into the European system. So it's not like stuff can just, you can flip a switch and spin a few valves and the energy will flow the other direction. Now it has dedicated fields in Siberia that are not linked into the European network at all. So you might be able to surge a little bit of fuel on rail, and you might replace some of the crude that you're sending on rail with, say, refined product, so you can move up the value